Now, it appears many have raised concerns about the contributory pension scheme with respect or in consideration of the other schemes. So well, let's get to Abuja and hear them out. Nakwe?
Thank you, Chamberlain. Indeed, the contributory pension scheme came to take over the old defined benefits pension scheme, and some of its objectives were to establish sustainable pension system, to empower the worker to gain control over his retirement savings account. It minimizes the incentives for early retirement, ensure transparent and efficient management of pension funds, promotes a savings culture, secures compliance by all affected, and promotes wider coverage, establishes strong regulatory and supervisory framework with the establishment of the National Pension Commission. But in recent times, we've seen that a number of bodies have now started seeking to opt out of the National Pension Scheme, which is managed by the Pension Commission. The question is why? What precisely is making them want to come out of it? We have this morning Comrade Silva C. Wanwu, who is the National Chairman, Nigerian Union of Pensioners, Contributory Pension Scheme Sector. And we also have with us Comrade Boboy Kaigama, who is a former Trade Union Congress President. Gentlemen, welcome to Sunrise Elite this morning.
It's my pleasure. Yes.
What is this that we're hearing about permanent secretaries not wanting to be a part of this pension scheme? We've also had a number of other bodies, you know, especially of that of the National Assembly, the civil servants there saying, no, we don't want to be a part. I mean, we don't want to be under the executive. We are supposed to be an independent arm of government. People are wondering what exactly is raising this controversy. You know, why, first and foremost, do permanent secretaries want to opt out of the scheme? Do you have any answers? Let me start with you, sir.
Okay. It's not that they want to opt out. Mm-hmm. They are not in it from the onset. Unfortunately, they are the policymakers, the people that brought the idea to the federal government.
What do you mean by they were not in it in the first instance? Were they not regular civil servants at some point?
What I'm saying is this. Mm-hmm. From the very onset, mm-hmm. after presenting this policy to the government, they smartly exempted themselves.
That's the permanent secretaries.
Permanent secretaries, the retired head of service, mm-hmm. the services of the Federation, and accountant generals, no, those class of...
Well, the way I'm looking at, why I'm asking this question, I mean, a permanent secretary, in 2004 was when the scheme was finally passed into law. It was reviewed in 2014. The permanent secretaries who suggested this at the time and finally saw its passage are not the ones who are there till date.
Of course.
So, I mean that there are people who have been through the civil service. Oftentimes, the permanent secretaries are appointed from within the civil service. Isn't that correct?
Of course.
So if you have been contributing to a pension scheme for a while, and then do you all of a sudden get to a certain level and then you are not a part of it?
This is the big question that requires answer. I think PENCON is in the best position to answer that. But what we are saying is this. A precedent has been set.
Why?
By those who were PANSECs as at 2004.
Okay.
By opting out, they were not there. If you look at the exemption clause, it says the persons mentioned in section 291 of the Constitution, mm-hmm. and mainly they are judicial officers. You understand? So the PANSECs are not mentioned there. Mm-hmm. The military that later opted out were never mentioned there. Mm-hmm. How did the PANSECs and that class of civil servants opt out of the scheme?
Big question. I'll come to you, Mr. Kaigama, because I can see that you're dying to say something on this. But I'm trying to use my layman eyes to look at I've only heard of this. I have not interrogated it. So listening to your own submission right now, I'm asking certain questions. As at the time in 2004, some people would have argued that it would have been too late for people who are already at the peak of service, because you must admit that if you're a permanent secretary, There is nowhere you're going to again in the civil service scheme. You have reached the end of the peak of your career, so to speak, unless you are now appointed, into some political position. But when you are at that level, there is no way you're going to be contributing to a scheme that has just started. So some people would say it would have been excusable for the permanent secretaries at that time to have exempted themselves. Would you agree with that?
I would not agree with that. The reason is this: in the old scheme, there was no exemption clause.
Okay.
Because it was good for everybody. The fact that somebody has made an attempt to opt out of it shows you, it's an indicator that the scheme is faulty.
So even though you currently preside, will I say, let me look at your title again now. You're the National Chairman, National Union of Pensioners Contributory Pension Scheme Sector.
Yeah.
You think that this scheme is defective?
It is.
Okay. Let's leave it at that first. Comrade Gaigama, let's come to you.
Well,
what exactly has informed this new development?
Well, first and foremost, I want to correct an impression that ab initio, the permanent secretaries and other top government functionaries have not been part of the contributory pension scheme. I think it's not right. They've been part of it. This agitation is a recent development. As at 2004, when the Obasanjo administration enacted this law, it was meant to address the problem bedeviling the pension system there. And 18 years down the line, this system has accumulated over 14
trillion naira. This 14 trillion naira has been plunged into risk-free or less risky portfolios. It develops the Nigerian economy. Now, for people to say that there's no system that might not have one or two problems, for the permanent secretaries to now say they want to exempt themselves or head of service, just like you observed, they've been contributing from 2004 when the system started to date. Then suddenly, because as an infinitesimal proportion of the public service, because for you to be appointed a permanent secretary, you must have been a director. You will go through certain examination, then you are picked and appointed. So if you've gone through the ladder contributing for 18 years, and as a permanent secretary, you have certain perks of office. And the law has made provision for you to go with your full salary. Now, the question is it the pay you are paying now from your salary, or the deduction of your own portion of the contributions? That is, for now, the law says is 8%, and then the employer, the federal government, is 10%, which is not fully being implemented. That is your problem? Remember, like I said, they are less than 1% of the public sector. And we feel they have all the privileges their offices have given them to sacrifice to ensure that we have the stability, we have the continuity, we have the predictability, and we ensure that these funds that is there is maintained and allowed to grow, such that generations of public servants yet to come on board, and those that are existing now, can benefit
This is a system that is meant to protect the future of the public service.
I understand that.
So, for them to say they want to opt out now, it's not when the law started. It is now they want to opt out. It's rather the case of selfishness, greed, because you have everything. The law says that...
Oh, so you're not in support of it as well?
No. The law, Section 5, subsection 1A and B. Section 5(1)A says, derived that from the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, 1999 Constitution, Section 291, which clearly states that you can only exempt the armed forces, the intelligence agents, and the Secret Service. Then Section 5(1)B went further to say that at the inception of this, that is 2004, if as a public servant you have 3 years or less left in the service, you are exempted. But you have more, you make contributions. So this is a system that is, well, novel, but very, very laudable. I have never seen a system in this country that is as transparent as the contributory pension scheme. The only problem we have is with the employers. The employees' portion of the contribution is being deducted at source and remitted. Some employers don't remit their own. That is where you have problem. Then you still have what we call accrued rights. These accrued rights are rights that retirees are supposed to enjoy based on the fact that while you are working before 2004, there are certain rights you have that needs to be added to your own RSA. So if these things are accumulated, if you exist, you want to exist today, the system is programmed in such a way that before now, you have to go from one table to another to process your retirement benefit. But this one is an auto-pilot scheme. You don't have to go to any desk. All they need is your details, the codes, and what have you. By the time you submit these things, they have been processed.
Let me confirm that he can corroborate that. Is that how it has worked for your members who have left service and were part of the contributory pension scheme?
Yeah, to a large extent, yes. But the question asks if the system is defective, and I said yes. I didn't say that in totality. There are merits and demerits of it.
Oh, certainly.
The takeoff.
Yeah.
You understand? Okay, like you had mentioned, the PANSEX, there's a provision that they part with 100% or whatever, their exit salaries or whatever. The same thing in the old DBS. You see that these things are graduated. If you are retiring, at least once you clock 10 years in service, you are now qualified for retirement. And that attracts a percentage of gratuity as well as pension. And it graduates to 35 years, which is the ceiling. But now in the contributory pension, there's no such provision. And that's why you see the PANSEX and other top government officials have refused to key into this. And if they have been receiving 100% of their money from 2004, can somebody now come and tell me that they have been part of the contributory pension? The answer is no. And that's why I say from the onset, there is nothing wrong with the contributory pension system. Any transparent government, anywhere in the world, will buy into it. Like he has said, the security of funds, everything is very tight, very transparent. But the takeoff was where all the faults started. we hurried into it unnecessarily.
Some people say that would have been expected. The hitches, the hiccups would have been expected at the takeoff. I mean, when you're starting a new system and you're trying to implement something new, you would expect some hiccups.
But with proper planning, some of the hiccups could be avoided. Mm-hmm. You understand? For instance, you don't categorize all the pensioners together. What I mean is this. Among these pensioners or workers, you have those by 2004 that were already due for retirement, mm-hmm. who have served over 10 years. They're a category. There are people who were not up to that pension limit age. And there are people that were employed in 2004. We can call them the child of the scheme. You can now see three categories. So there would have been some portion of maybe percentage due to those who have, like he said, the scheme says if you have less than 3 years or less, mm-hmm. meaning that if I have from 4 years, meaning that I have put in 31 years in the old scheme, I will contribute for only 4 years. Will you now compare me with somebody who is employed in 2004 that will contribute for 35 years? This thing will work later. But they would have considered those that have put in everything in the old system.
Are you saying that if people only contribute for 4 years, they are only entitled to withdraw from only that which they have contributed for 4 years?
Yes, and including what is referred to as accrued right, which is what was due to them as at 2004 when the scheme started. So together.
That should be fair.
And this will be used
shouldn't that be fair enough?
How would it be fair?
Because the person who joins in 2004,
okay,
up till now, I mean, I don't think that's not up to 30 years, is it?
But there are other things involved.
Yes, that person, if the person decides to retire tomorrow, that person will only be drawing from what the employer and himself have contributed. Isn't that correct?
Sorry, ma. If the federal government had given option to those who want to retire, mm-hmm. if it had been made option, I promise you a lot of civil servants would have retired, preferred to retire under the old system. But this thing was forced on everybody. And the people that we look up to, those high hierarchy of civil servants, that would have represented the middle class, the lower workers, didn't do anything in favor of those below. They were just after themselves. And that's why government itself have been very dishonest. The system is not transparent. I'm not talking of running of the system. Mm-hmm. Go to PENCOM, go to the PFS, they are doing fantastic work. Mm-hmm. But the government have been very dishonest about it.
Well, it still doesn't explain why, because as Comrade Kaigama said, this agitation by permanent secretaries to leave is a new development. It doesn't explain why the permanent secretaries want to opt out now.
He said they are opting out now.
Yes.
But these are people who are receiving 100% of whatever they were enjoying while in service. So they have never been part of it.
Well,
just a moment. Let me take this conversation to my colleagues as they have questions for you. Ladies and gentlemen.
Well, thank you, Mokwe. I think I'm just going to allow Comrade Kaigama to respond to that, because part of the things that you said earlier, Comrade, when you began the talk, was that this is about one of the most transparent processes so far. So if it is as transparent and it was recommended by the bureaucracy, how come it's a section of the bureaucracy that still wants to opt out?
Thank you very much. That's what I said. The reason is very simple. The section of the bureaucracy who have enough perks in their offices, who are enjoying full salaries on exit still want to get more instead of sacrificing for the system to grow. Because if you want to opt out, I'll cite a critical example for you. When the military opted out, is a constitutional matter because Section 291 gave that privilege to them. I am telling you that the 2022 budget is making provision of 577 billion naira to pay their gratuity and pensions. Now, within the same budget, that is if you go to the service-wide budget provision, if you go to the contributory pension scheme, the military is not up to put the military, the intelligentsia, the secret service, they are not up to 304,000 policemen that we have on ground now. And these people within the PITAT system are golfing 577 billion naira annually from the government purse. Then if you go to the accrued rights section of the same year budget, it is just 125 billion that you are going to put as accrued right to service those on the contributory pension scheme that are exiting. Which one is better for government? Do you want to continue to budget? Sometimes most of the budgetary provisions are not funded. So that means if the budget is not funded 100%, those that you are supposed to dole out 577 billion naira to will not get it. But those that are supposed to get the 125 billion, obviously, head or tail, you'll be able to get that. So that is why we are saying that this one is more stable. You can predict it, and you'll be able to do. So what we're employing government to do is, look, keep to the funding of your accrued rights. Then contribute your own portion monthly, just like the employee is contributing their own portion monthly. It solves the problem. It is very, very transparent. The PFS are the ones that are administering these funds. PENCOM is only overseeing, like central bank overseeing the commercial banks. The custodians are keeping custody of these funds. So it is a system that is, you know, in Nigeria, change is something that,
if I could just ask you,
we see as if it is like an enemy.
Just a moment, comrade.
Endurance.
You know, when you say this is transparent and all of that,
we have a pool of about 14.
I hope you can hear me, Comrade Kaigama.
2 trillion.
Can you hear me, Comrade Kaigama? Now, the thing about this is that, look, even the National Assembly themselves, because now they're seeking to amend Section 51A of the Act of 2014, wherein they want to also include themselves in the category of those referred to in Section 291 of the Constitution, exempting themselves. So they want to come up with their own scheme. So if all of this was transparent, as you say it is, how do we explain this scenario from the National Assembly themselves?
Well, sir, what you are supposed to know is that the National Assembly members are no contributors to the contributory pension scheme. They are trying to insert their own kind of pension scheme, different from the contributory pension scheme. So if you are talking of the amendment, it's probably to put themselves in the Constitution so that they will be benefiting certain pensions. Like, you know, you cannot serve a system for 8 years and say you want pension. We have their own sovereign gratuity that is worked out. But when you say you want pension, a National Assembly member, probably a governor, senator, had been a public servant. You have retired from the system. You are enjoying the defined benefit pension system right now. But again, because you are at the National Assembly, you want another stream of pension again for yourself. So that one does not have any correlation, my brother, with what the contributory pension scheme is all about. Because they are not part, ab initio, they are not part of the system.
In other words, it is not right.
Politician of 4 years.
So it's not right when they say that
how can you be a party to this?
So it's not right when they say, look, we want to exempt ourselves from CPS and onto the DBS because we are members of CPS. So that perspective is not correct from them.
Ab initio, they are not part of CPS. They are not.
All right.
So they just want to carve out something for themselves in the Constitution.
So, comrade, if we recall that the old system was fraught with not being funded in the budget, delay in payment for civil servants, they would wait years before they would get their gratuities. And now they are, calling sector by sector for an exit, as you have rightly noted, from the CPS back to the DBS. Aren't they wary of the old system where the budget was not funded and there was so much delay? Or is there something that we're missing there? Is it selective? Is payment selected for some and it doesn't quite meet the needs of the others?
Well, like I said, in every system, you must have problems. This is a case of those at the top echelon of government trying to opt out. Then, on the part of the police, there's the police aspect. Like I said, those who want to opt out are not being sincere. Because if you go to the private sector are very, very diligent and follow the law to its little minutest bits. So they contribute every month their own portion as employers. They contribute every month after deduction, the employee's portion. So you don't have the problem in the private sector. It is only in the public sector where the government was, because the civil servant's salary is being controlled by you, you deduct their own and remit. But you don't remit your own portion. It's a two-way thing. Your own portion and that of your employee. So if these things are put together, it's seamless. So why can't those in government encourage government to meet their own part of the obligation, to make the system work seamlessly? Do you want to go back to the system where it is only relying on budgetary provision? And we have never seen in this country where government has implemented its budget 100%. In fact, in a year, if they've gotten up to 60%, you give them a pat on the back. It has never happened. So we don't want to do this. We want to go to a system that is predictable, that is stable. Whatever challenges that is there, let's put our heads together and solve the challenges. Otherwise, this is a system that is not only the government. The trade union side was involved in putting this system together. They went out of the shores of this country, understudied how it works in Europe, in other African countries, then came up and put this law in place. When a law is starting, imagine just in 18
I wonder
years,
if you can hear me. So essentially, you're acknowledging that government will be unable to fund it, even though senior civil servants are desiring to opt out of the CPS and return to the DBS.
Obviously, we had the experience in the past. That was why the government itself introduced the CPS. If we didn't have the problem of the defined benefits, why the introduction of the CPS? So there must be a very serious problem in the past. And we are correcting this problem. And you know the funds that are in place. Over 14 trillion. From government side, how much have they saved to fund the defined benefit pensioners.
But
They've said
comrade,
nothing.
one other thing that would
say, okay,
naturally,
we only
if you can
provide
hear me, comrade,
budget for
one other thing
this
that would
year,
naturally
we
come
budget for
on
the
in
next
this
year,
matter, comrade, if you can hear me, one other conversation that one can also have about it is a legal provision where there is some form of negotiation that is still possible in Section 4 of the Pension Reform Act of 2014. But we'll take that on when we return from this break. Please stay with us. Well, let me take this to Comrade Wewu. Both of you, are giving us some information about this whole pension thing, and a number of people will be wondering exactly what the issues are, because it will seem like the law tends to have covered as many grounds as possible. Take a look at Section 4, Sub 4 of the Pension Reform Act of 2014, for instance. And it says this: notwithstanding any of the provisions of this act, an employer may agree, A, on the payment of additional benefits to the employee upon retirement, or B, elect to bear the full responsibility of the scheme, provided that in such a case, the employer's contribution shall not be more than 20% of the monthly emoluments of the employee. Now, already it would seem like the law already foresees a possibility where the employer can take full responsibility for the pension benefits. So why exit it if this provision is not there? Or, as Bukola asked the other time, is there something we're missing?
Yeah, certainly. There are variables. And when I keep saying that the takeoff was 40, these variables would have been considered first and foremost. Now, you are now saying that the employer may. It's optional. The employer may decide to do so or not. Now, we should remember that in the DBS, there used to be what is called gratuity, which is additional benefit. And that particular section, Section 4, subsection 1 or so, that you made reference to, is actually talking about that gratuity. But gratuity is entirely missing in the CPS. So what happens now is that gratuity that's supposed to be a parting gift from the employer to the employee at retirement has been totally removed. And that's why there's much pressure today on what we call lump sum. If retirees are allowed to benefit from gratuity that have been there, my comrade had just mentioned about change, which is not easy. A change that is not meant to enhance you, a change that is taking you from left to right or from right to left, will definitely not be easy.
Oh,
it's just like somebody being left-handed from birth. And suddenly at old age, you want to force that person to learn how to use left hand. It's difficult. Most of us join civil service.
But comrade, just a minute, because that explanation may not be exactly what this scenario is, because don't forget the reason why the CPS was set up, because the DBS, it was difficult for government to pay, people were not getting paid, and then they came up with the CPS. So if people are arguing that let them leave the CPS and get back to DBS, isn't the same challenge going to accrue? How will people then get their pensions? Because that won't address the problems of getting their pensions paid, will it?
Yeah, and that's where I say government have been dishonest. The same government that cried out that it has no money to pay to meet up with its pension liabilities is the same government that went behind to start opening the back exit doors for some people to leave the service. Is that not an indication that it has money to pay? And personally, I don't share that sympathy that at any time Nigerian government lacked money to pay pensions or salaries. It's just mismanagement. That is the fact.
So what exactly are you asking?
Right,
Okay,
I think
go ahead. Yeah, what would you want to happen to get it right? Yeah.
Good. The contributory pension scheme actually will address a lot of anomalies. At least when you are leaving the service, their money is there for you. It is no longer subject to annual budgetary allocations. Now, the introduction of the payroll tax has made available a pool of funds that is there. That is okay. But we are now saying, before going into this, they would have looked at, decided what is going to be the minimum pension. For instance, do you know that if not for some inner engineering being handled by PENCON today, a lot of people will not have what is called pension? Because one of the policies says you must not collect an amount as pension less than 50% of your exit salary. For instance, if I were receiving 100,000 while in service, I should be expected to have up to 50,000 naira as pension. But how many people are enjoying up to 20% in the system? Because these things, these variables were not looked into at all. There are people that their total contribution, both accrued and whatever, it's not even up to 500,000 naira. And what does PENCON do? PENCON will gather the whole thing and give you to go and take care of yourself. Ordinarily, they would have spread it for 10 years. Somebody had contributed 4 million naira, and we want to give that person pension at least for the first 10 years, should be expecting to have like 40,000 naira, or there are 30-something thousand naira a month. But what of the lump sum that will help you to resettle after retirement? So PENCON will look at it and say, okay.
Mr. Nwewu,
yeah.
That's where I'd like to come in, because it would seem like civil servants, employees, workers in the public sector have an unfair advantage over those in the private sector, or perhaps some others in the public sector who are enlisted in the CPS and are not entitled to that gratuity, that lump sum that you collect at the end of, your service with the organization. How can that system be challenged? Or should those enlisted in the CPS just accept it as like that?
Yeah, like it has been established, that there's a provision in that section that the employer may. We are now saying that clause may should be removed. And let it be mandatory that that additional benefit should be paid, which amounts to gratuity. I don't know if I've answered that question.
Okay, well, that again, it depends on the employers, that are concerned here, be it public sector or private sector. They definitely operate differently. But I'd like to ask you, and as I hope that Comrade Kagama might also want to speak to it. Now, there are those who believe that with the current agitation, and as Comrade Kagama said the other time, new requests or agitation by some segments of the public sector that they want to exit the CPS, that the whole system could collapse. The National Assembly wants to opt out. You've also confirmed that the other time. The police wants to opt out. The top echelon of the public sector wants to opt out. Public service wants to opt out. And who knows who else? So the question then is, what are the risks that could accrue should these pockets of segments of the public sector opt out of the CPS? What are the risks? Or is it okay for them to exit?
Is it not even a mockery that the National Assembly that enacted the law for CPS is agitating to opt out, does it mean that it understands the law at all that they've enacted? You don't make law for a particular group of people. That's why you see the justice is wearing a blind. It's blindfolded. Now, even in section 291 that my comrade cited, I've tried to go through the Constitution, section 291 of the Constitution. I didn't find where the military was mentioned. If it is there, probably the one I read was incomplete. I didn't see the top civil servants mentioned. Now, since government has started, because from 2004,
question that I asked, just so we can drive this home very, very quickly. Just a second there, Comrade Wewu. The question is simple. What are the risks should these segments exit the CPS?
If they exit what they are now saying, or what they are suggesting, is the collapse of the entire system.
Okay. All right, let me ask the same question of Comrade Kaigama.
If it is not good for anyone, it is not good for everybody.
Okay, let me ask the same question of Comrade Kaigama. Do you agree with him? Are there risks to it? You said the other time that the National Assembly wants to create an entirely different pension system for themselves. We're not even talking about that one. But should these pockets of segments of the public service exit the CPS? Are there risks that we may or may not know?
Obviously, there is a very, very serious and monumental risk. I will cite you the case of the police personnel. Like I said, as of September 2011, we have 304,963 police personnel in the payroll of government. And a kind of actuarial valuation of this personnel showed that you need 1.84 trillion in a year to service their pension and gratuity in the defined benefit system. Similarly, putting it side by side, in the contributory pension scheme, the same number of policemen, you only need 113 billion naira to pay for their own accrued rights. My brother, imagine you are removing 1.8 trillion in the system. Are you not saying the system should collapse? Are you not saying that not only the system, but even the economy? Let me tell you, like I said initially, the 14-point-something trillion is going a long way to service the economy of this country, because the investment is more in the benefit of the development of the government. So if you are saying that you are going to plug this out, what are you saying? You are going worse than what you have in the past. So what we are trying to say here is that it is lack of education. Probably we encourage PENCOM to, in their own budgets, to set aside certain sums of money to execute some of these people that do not even know the principle behind the establishment of the contributory pension scheme. Because when people talk of National Assembly, these are people not contributing in that are not captured in the law or are contributors in the contributory pension scheme. Then, if you talk of my colleague here, they are affiliates of NLC. NLC has been part. Yeah. In fact, even they are on the board of. So, when we imagine, where are we having this lacuna? Is it that even the personnel, even our members do not really understand the workings of this system, that we need to educate them, or what? Your labor center was involved in the institution of this system. And now you are saying that probably your labor center has done the wrong thing. That is invariably what you are saying.
Well, I mean, you're a labor man, so you understand how it works within the labor circles. But perhaps a refresher course might not be out of order. I mean, he acknowledges that it's been working last year. So let me get this straight. Are you people the ones now saying that the permanent secretaries should be exempt?
Oh, none of us is making any case for or against the permanent secretaries. We are all after the scheme.
Yes.
What we are saying,
yes,
from the beginning of the Pension Reform Act,
yes,
2014, as amended, Section 1, you see that the main aim is to provide a uniform pension
what I'm saying is,
now,
from what you are
yeah,
explaining, I mean, from all that you have explained so far, are you saying that permanent secretaries should be exempted from this scheme?
Why should they be exempted? Okay. They should be part of it. He made mention of sacrifice.
Yes, because you said that they were never part of it from the get-go.
Yes,
that's what you said.
We understand, because this thing is just like a forfeiture of a contract that has already been signed. Before I became a civil servant, I had the opportunity of working in a private sector. But what attracted me is pension. And now you just wake up somebody and the pension is no longer there.
But your pension is being paid, isn't that correct?
It's being paid, but paid as peanuts.
It doesn't come up too much.
It doesn't come up much because it's based on your contribution. And the contribution is a function of how much you earn. That's why it's poor. Those in the private sector, they don't complain because for the first time you are having a uniform pension system with the public and the sector. From 1961, it used to be NPF until around 1993 that NSITF, the National Insurance Trust Fund, replaced the National Provident Fund. So they have been at parity, but now there's uniformity. Why should some section of workers now have to leave the system without making the due sacrifice that others already engaged in?
Well, a number of questions have arisen, and I know that we certainly will keep our eyes on this particular one until we get further clarity on the matter. But we have to thank you, gentlemen, for coming on Sunrise Daily this morning. Comrade Boboy Kagama is the former president of the Trade Union Congress, and Comrade Silva Mwewu is the national chairman, Nigeria Union of Pensioners Contributory Pension Scheme Sector. Once again, thank you for coming on Sunrise Daily.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
We'll take a break at this point, and then we'll be back to talk about the economy and how it affects you in just a moment. Please stay with us.